Hi everybody, my name is Dennis and welcome back to another album review. Today we're reviewing the latest EP from the Suicide Boys, who have teamed up with Travis Barker, the drummer of Blink-182. And this is entitled Live Fast, Die Whenever. Now, you may remember towards the end of last year I reviewed this last Suicide Boys album, I Wanna Die in New Orleans. And I actually was surprised with how much I enjoyed it. A lot of the hooks were catchy, the flows were good, and the production was really on point for the most part. Now, granted, the hyper-aggression could lead to the tracks becoming more corny or muddled or even cringy at times, but for the most part, the tracks were really enjoyable. And even though I was a bit shaky on a couple of the singles I heard from this EP, I was still looking for some of the deeper cuts to be more enjoyable, but unfortunately the majority of these tracks are just really bland and forgettable. The opening track, Kill Two Birds with 22 Stones, has really bland and uninspired lyrics that explore absolutely nothing that the Suicide Boys haven't already talked about in depth in the past. The production is really boring, it's really generic, especially for their style. And the heavy guitar riffs that are implemented in here, I assume because of Travis Barker, it does give it a bit more of a punk feel than much of their previous work. This and a couple of the other songs on the EP. But the guitar work is really lazy, it's really bland, the riffs are just so underdone. It's just like bum 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 bum, and it's like you could make that kind of riff so insanely easy just with no work whatsoever. It just left me feeling so unimpressed, and it ended up being a really bland track all the way through. Song Sour Grapes almost sounds like it took the same rap elements from Killing Two Birds with 22 Stones, spiced up the beat a little bit, took out the punk elements, and just threw it out again. Once again, it's a really standard song for the Suicide Boys at this point. Has the very dark, heavy beat. They're very gritty, edgy lyrics, and it just does nothing of interest. The beat isn't even all that good. Granted, I do like what they did better than what they did with it on Killing Two Birds with 22 Stones, but it's so insanely similar that it just feels so rushed and just thrown out there so quickly. I wish they'd just spend a little more time on this to develop something more interesting. The song Don't Trust Anyone actually wasn't that bad, although the very aggressive chorus can get a bit irritating at times. I think the guitar work is a lot better here. I think the instrumentals are much more enjoyable. I think it's just a much more solid track overall. The flows are much better on this song than on the previous songs I mentioned, even though the lyrics still really aren't anything to look at. It's a solid song, and it's an enjoyable listen overall, if I'm being honest. The song Individuality was so last year. Again, is another decent song on the album. Once again, I don't think the hook is all that great, but I think a lot of their verses are catchy, especially the second verse I thought was really well done. I like how the flow changes up at times, and I kind of like the heavy, almost like vibrating beat, both on this song and the one before it. The distortion actually made it a lot more enjoyable, in my opinion. And then the final two tracks on the EP were both teased ahead of time, the first being Aliens Are Ghosts, which for some reason featured a sample of online music critic Anthony Fantano of The Needle Drop and his review of their previous full-length album that I mentioned earlier. And it just seems like it has random critiques that he had of it in there, and it doesn't really match with the lyrics that the Suicide Boys bring out at all. It just feels really out of place. I don't know if they were trying to show that they acknowledge the criticism. I don't know if they're trying to show that they're too tough for it, that they don't care, but it just felt so awkward and out of place. And the beat was really bland and uninspired as well, with their flows going over it almost awkwardly in a way that they don't quite match up, where their flows and the verses and just all of the instrumentals just could never quite line up. They'd get close at times, but then they would just stray, and it made it a really distracting song. The last song, Nothing Left, Nothing Left, was easily the most punk rock song on the album, had the heaviest guitar riffs by far, but even then, I'm sorry, it was a really it was really poorly done. It was a poor track overall. The guitar riffs are pretty mediocre. There's constant screaming, and the scream vocals really aren't even that good on this song. They're really high pitched, they're really frustrating to listen to, and they're really just not all that good. Once again, the guitar work feels really out of place. Their voices just really don't match with it all that well. There's almost like random guitar licks thrown in the instrumentals at seemingly just whenever they feel like it. There's no rhyme or reason to it, and it makes it a really difficult track to listen to despite its short runtime. And with all that being said, this was just a really bland EP. There were a couple of decent songs, and they definitely had some good ideas, and I will admit I do like how they tried something new on Nothing Left, Nothing Left. It was unlike anything I've personally ever heard from the band in the past. Now, granted, the Suicide Boys are known for putting out EP after EP after EP after EP, so they do tend to rush their music a lot, and it's hard to listen to everything they do. But from what I've heard of them, Nothing Left, Nothing Left is a very unique cut for them, and I'm glad they're stepping out of their comfort zone some, but it was just really poorly executed here. So, I mean, with all that being said, I'm feeling a light 5 on this. If you checked out this EP, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Be sure to tell me how wrong my opinion is, as always, and I'll see you in the next review.